Hi, 8th graders. This is Mrs. Arietta for your Day 7 video, Tuesday, March 31st. Let's go over the list of what you have to do today. So first and foremost, independent reading with the reading log and the reflection, of course. There are 3 more sources for you to read for your narrative that you're going to be writing about climate change and global warming. The 4th source is more like an infographic, but you still need to go over it. So you're going to read and annotate source 2, 3, and 4. And there is also a short story by Ray Bradbury. If that name sounds familiar, it's because last year in 7th grade, you all read Dark They Were and Golden-Eyed by Ray Bradbury. He's a pretty famous science fiction author. So you're going to get to read a short story by him. For writing, you're going to write the reflection on the sources 2 through 4, and we are going to work on a story map for your narrative. Now, we've not done story maps in school, so I'm hoping that it's pretty obvious what you're supposed to do on it, but I've put a little guide on how to do it effectively. So before we can move on to that story map, you need to read sources 2 through 4 and annotate the sources as you go with a highlighter or pen or pencil. You are looking specifically for facts or examples of climate change that may lead to an intriguing character, some way that it can shape your characters and the way they interact with their setting. Intense or suspenseful plot points. So is there something in nature that could present a serious problem for your characters? And lastly, an effective setting that impresses upon the audience a theme of climate change and its negative effects. So can you set your story somewhere and sometime where these climate changes are going to be apparent to the audience? So when you start writing that reflection page at the very end of all 3 sources, you're going to write both fact examples and you're going to explain how you want it to inform your narrative and its elements. So make sure you include, I learned in source 2 that blank. This will be in my story by, it will change my characters. It'll do this to my plot. Make sure you include both of those things. So go ahead and pause this video if you have not yet done this. And I'm going to be moving on to the story map. Now, this is something that we learned in Step Up to Writing, but we've not used it because usually we try to do the plot diagram. We want to make sure that you guys know all of the elements of the plot. And tomorrow, when you start your rough draft, I will make sure I include a plot diagram so that you remember what elements go into telling a story effectively in the narrative format. You need to fill out all 5 of these spaces on your packet. First thing that it asks for is the setting. So where does your story take place? When does it take place? What is the weather like? All of this, the where exactly and when and what it's like in that moment. That's what belongs in setting. So if it's important to the story that it is set not only in a coastal area, but during a hurricane, make sure you include the weather and when it is taking place. That is all part of setting. Next thing is the characters. So make sure you describe who is the protagonist, what is their name, what are they like. You need to include details about your protagonist. Antagonist. Now this only works if the bad guy is actually a person. Sometimes the antagonist is not a character. Sometimes the antagonist is a force of nature. Now, this story is not limited. You don't have to use nature as your antagonistic force. You may have a bad guy. You may have an antagonist. But make sure that if it is a character that you included in this box. And then lastly, we have supporting characters. Who else do you need to include in the story for our protagonist to go about the story? The next thing you should do is actually the problem. What problem or issue are the characters going to have to overcome throughout the story? So if it's a problem presented by the antagonist, if it's a problem of nature or a natural force like a storm or flood, make sure you write fully what is the problem they're going to have to overcome. It's not going to be one single moment. It's going to be a problem that they must face for the entire story. And then the last box is the solution. How do the characters overcome the problem or issue? And how will the story resolve? I recommend doing outside 4 boxes first, so you have a better picture of what your story looks like on the surface level. And that's when you go a little bit deeper into the story and into this diagram. Based on the problem that you've introduced and the way that you want the characters to solve the problem, is there a moral or a lesson that you can tie into it? So maybe at the end of the story, the characters learn the impact of littering and trash and that they need to take better care of the planet. Maybe they're overcoming something in nature that we can't change through our behavior and changing littering. Maybe it's a moral of standing together and facing problems together. It doesn't have to be a lesson that is, we must fix this climate change issue. You can make the moral something else. Just make sure that when you look at the problem and the solution, you can see some sort of lesson that the characters have to learn in order to solve the problem. Maybe that theme connects those 2 boxes together. So the last thing that you need to do after you've done your story map, pause if you need to do it. The last thing is your independent reading of All Summer in a Day by Ray Bradbury. Now, luckily, there are no questions today for this story, but there are 2 questions tomorrow and a longer question on Thursday. So as you are reading the story, annotate the text with a highlighter or a pen or pencil, and you're going to look specifically for quotes or examples that would answer some questions about descriptive language or figurative language, symbolism, dialogue, what the characters say, conflict between characters, and characteristics. What is there to know about the different characters, and how do we know this information about them? For the descriptive language and symbolism, look at the sun. Not literally, please don't look at the sun, you'll burn your eyes. I mean, in the story, how does he use the sun? How does he describe it? What does it symbolize? That's really all I have for you, so go ahead and read that Ray Bradbury story, and tomorrow I'll hopefully have some sentence starters for you and explanation on how to answer those questions about it. Good luck, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye!